Hello everyone, this is Paul Andrews, Technical Specialist for Autodesk Media and Entertainment. Today in this webinar we'll be looking at the creative grading and visual effects tools and workflows in the recently released Flame Premium 2013 Anniversary Edition. For those of you who may not be familiar with Flame Premium and our new 20th Anniversary Edition, it's a suite of tools that unifies three major disciplines of post-production: grading, editing, and visual effects into one product from Autodesk, Flame Premium. As artists, we're often asked to venture into portions of post-production that blurs the lines of these three areas to get the project done. This is why we feel that Autodesk Flame Premium adds so much value to your craft, because it brings together the tools of Flame for visual effects, Smoke for editorial, and Luster for real-time grading into one package. Moving into today's webinar, I'd like to thank our friends at Cinepost Production Services in Berlin, Germany, and colorist Sebastian Guz for sharing the 2011 Oscar-nominated film In Darkness with us today. We will be taking an in-depth look at the methods used for doing modern digital intermediate finishing using Flame Premium and specific techniques Sebastian used in creating the look and mood of this World War II film set in Poland. Let's take a look at the trailer, and that'll give us some context for what we're going to be seeing today. So the quick synopsis of the film is that a city sewer worker in Nazi-occupied Lvov, Poland, encounters a group of Jews trying to escape. For a fee, he hides them in a labyrinth of sewers beneath the city. And as time goes on, his attachment to the people shifts from a financial opportunity to more of a personal relationship where the men and women and children attempt to outwit certain death by the German forces for about 14 months. Telling a story with color becomes a very important part of this film. Muted colors, darkness in the underground sewers, trying to mix hope and despair. You kind of get the point here. A very challenging circumstance for a DP and for an art director. And this is especially true when you have the production issue of shooting with a red camera in areas with limited light. So lots of supplemental light had to be added during the shoot to keep the red signal clean, and that must be addressed in color. Now, this is where Sebastian and the guys at Cinepost used Autodesk grading tools and their own 3D lookup table to create the appropriate look and mood for the film. As we go through the presentation today, you'll see how Sebastian used color, keying, the shape system to create changes in image density and light, which contrasts the environments of life in Lvov above ground versus life hiding in the sewers. To get started with the project in Flame Premium, we open on the desktop where we work on our project. The desktop is driven by 5 main tabs at the bottom of the screen. The Tools tab, which brings us to a subset of tabs here that we see for compositing. That brings us into the environment for action, logic ops, the keyers, transform tools, stabilizer, things like that. Look development tools like glows and optics, color correctors, things like that. And it's pretty easy to use these tools in what we call the desktop and these reels, where you just pick something like, let's say the glow tool, come up here, pick your clip, give it a destination, and then you can go through and start working with different kinds of things like these radial glows, or maybe there's some presets in here that you want to do something maybe with some rays. These different presets allow you to do some quick treatments on the desktop, process those out really quick, and then when you're done processing those, you can exit out. You have your new clip sitting on the desktop. This is one of the great parts of what Flame Premium does, and actually what Flame artists have done for a long time, is being able to use this area that we call the desktop to essentially explore ideas. It is the ideation area of Flame Premium. Quick tools for experimenting and kind of working out the different kinds of things you might want to do. Filter tools, blurs and deforms, and time warps. These are all sorts of things that you can do, plugins and clip modifiers, and even a utilities area where you can get to a VTR if you need to, or do some burn-ins of time code or letterboxes. But all these different kinds of tools are really quick desktop modification areas or experimental look development areas. To get content in to start doing our work, we're going to go to another part of this main tab area down the bottom called the Media Hub. And inside the Media Hub, this is a file browser where I can go and start drilling into where my content might be. In fact, I've got a bookmark for my content that will take me straight away into a folder that has a number of the different clips that we're going to be using today. Any of these clips, double tap on them and you get a viewer over here, and then you can play and audition these clips before you use them. And when you're ready to use them, then you can drag and drop them into the interface for use just by picking the clip up, dragging it, putting it into your media library, maybe into a default folder, and then it's available for you to use within the context of your project. There's a drop-down menu that you can go in and delete that clip if you want, so it's no longer in that folder. And then you could do this maybe as a group, where you could highlight the first clip, you could highlight the last clip in the grouping, which now makes a selection of all clips, and that lets you drag and drop all those clips in. Now, one of the things that we talked about over the trailer that we saw was the use of color tools, and what's really important in the path of this particular project was the use of color management. Before we go too much further, we should talk about ACES. It's an acronym for the Academy Color Encoding System, ACES, and is a SMPTE standards-based color management architecture designed for the production, mastering, and long-term archiving of motion picture and television production content. Flame Premium has implemented ACES workflow as Autodesk Color Management. Now, prior to ACES, artists would use lookup tables, or LUTs, to view or convert images into different color spaces and data sets, a process that was prone to possible data loss. ACES uses a working color space that is larger than any existing camera format, scene linear color space, in a 16-bit half-float dataset. So any camera data format can be promoted into ACES without fear of data loss. This brings media formats that might have different gamma curves or RGB primaries, color spaces, bit depths, etc. into a common environment for grading and compositing. Now, this is illustrated here as we see many different kinds of source image formats that enter into the ACES pipeline using an IDT, or Input Device Transform. The IDT converts the source media into the ACES environment. Then, in order to visualize and display your ACES images properly, there is a Reference Rendering Transform, the RRT, which can be thought of as the look, and an Output Device Color Transform, the ODT, calibrated to your monitoring environment. And that could be your graphics monitor, it could be a HD TV, maybe a cinema projector. There's a growing list of these transforms that are being implemented so your images are color managed properly. Now let's take a look at how we could apply ACES and the Autodesk Color Management workflow in our In Darkness project. So this particular clip that we have selected here, if we go down and we say use a LUT, well, like I said, you could use a 1D LUT or a 3D LUT, but now we have this thing called the color transforms. And in these color transforms, it takes me to a menu that I can now go to a whole variety of different kinds of tools. If I have a camera, I could go to the Arri camera, a Canon camera, Sony. It supports a number of different formats, the F-35, the F-65. which is the new camera Sony put out. In this particular case, the content that I'm using is actually coming from film. It's actually, we talked about red. It's not really film, but it's already been translated into a set of DPX files, and these are 10-bit log files. So I'd want to use the ADX10 to ACES format, and that will now take that clip and put it into the ACES environment for me. Okay? Now, when we take that clip, just like we talked about just a few minutes ago, I would take that clip and I would drag it and I'd put it, let's say, in my default folder. And if we take a look at that, we can see this in a video space right now, which doesn't look quite right. And that's really because we've applied that transform to it. I really want to look at that in my ACES to graphics lookup table. So if I apply that, now I'm in a ACES gamut, so my color space is right. The viewing transform that I'm working with is right. And now what I can start doing is, if I want to do my editorial, do my compositing, whatever it is, I'm now working in a color space and gamut that's much wider in its ability to hold the amount of data that we might want to put into this particular piece. Now, in this particular job, maybe I want to maybe go more to a traditional workflow. And that's not a problem, because what I can do is I can go into my pre-processed clip and I can turn off the ACES element for that. So now I'm looking at my element as a flat element. I can look at it as a log element. So now I'm using more of a traditional workflow. And the reason I'm doing this is because the guys at Cinepost, they used their own lookup table right here called log to Rec 709 Lightspace for Autodesk. Now, this is their color management tool that they used within the system. So you can really use Flame Premium for color management in a traditional sense, like the guys at Cinepost did, looking at this, or you can use it in the ACES workflow. One or the other, depending on your workflow, may make a big difference, because you might be combining live action footage and CGI elements, and you may need that bigger gamut to bring those elements into the ACES format. Maybe you're working with floating point images or 16-bit integer images, things that are larger data sets that require something like the ACES workflow and the Autodesk Color Management to deal with that. In the case of this particular project, 10-bit log material is the format of choice, and we don't necessarily need ACES. So you kind of pick and choose, depending on your workflow, depending on the project, to what makes sense to get that project done. Let's take a momentary diversion here and talk about using dedicated control surfaces for doing the grading work that you might want to do inside Flame Premium. Now, there's no reason why you can't use a keyboard and tablet, much like I've been doing for the presentation today so far. I know a lot of guys who are very successful actually using this kind of a configuration. But I also know that just by having a dedicated control surface like we see here, which is the tangent element panel, and I'm using the 5-panel configuration today, you can get lots of work done in a very fast manner by just using the controls that we see here for, let's say, lift and gain, work on our gammas a little bit, something like that. Let's pull our saturation back. But being able to do things like this where you're cross-processing the mids and the blacks against each other. So, you know, those kind of curves that you can start to build, absolutely doable inside the Flame Premium using the keyboard and the tablet, but you're doing things kind of one at a time, where here we're kind of combining tasks in a very fast and efficient manner. So it's really, you know, if you want to do it this way, you can. If you want to do it with the tablet and the keyboard, you can. If you have an Autodesk control surface, that works with the Flame Premium grading product too. So don't feel like you know, that's something that's in history or anything like that. It's certainly available to do. I just happen to have the tangent panel available to me now that we can just take a quick look at that. So let's go back to our main application and our main portion of our demo using the regular user interface. Conforming can be a challenging part of any project. And here in Flame Premium, we've added a new Conform tab that we think really makes this process a much more streamlined and less painful way to put together timelines. Final Cut Pro XMLs, AAFs, EDLs supported here. We right-click on that. Takes us to where our EDL is located. We can select different criteria to load that EDL. And when we do load the EDL, we see a list of all the different events that put this EDL together. Lots of different things for the name, the time code, resolutions, bit depths. All these things go into part of the Conform. In fact, if we take a look at our timeline area, this is the skeleton of the timeline that we want to put together. The red outlines on any of these clips are essentially clips with no media. And if I click on any of them, there's a really cool simultaneous or parallel tool here that shows me which event that's pointing to. And we can scroll through that and we can maybe do selection-based conforms. But in this particular case, we want to really put this all together as one large chunk. So what we want to do is we want to take the tool and we want to point it to the location of where our content lives, in this case in this folder called In Darkness. Let's set that, and immediately when I set that location, I get a number of yellow markers here that are suggesting that there's content there, but it can't make a positive match on this for some reason. The criteria that I have set on this conform doesn't really match up with the list that I have. So I can go in and I can change the kind of criteria that I'm using to do the match. And as soon as I change that to source timecode, all of a sudden now I've got some green check marks here next to some of these events that now indicate a positive match. And we can go ahead and link the match sources. Now this is really cool for going through and finding content that's on an external file system. Now what if your content already exists in your machine, and actually my assistant already put this content in here in this folder called sources. So here we see all the clips listed, and I can essentially just say set this as the conform search location. So let's do that, and instantly now I've got check marks next to all of my events. So by changing the match criteria and also pointing the Flame Premium Conform tool to the location of where that content lives, now I've got a positive match between all these events. Now I can come here to the link match sources, link them. We see the little chain or the link marker on all the different events there, and we can swipe here to the right and we can have a little player up so we can scrub through what we've conformed. Notice that in the timeline all of the clips no longer have a red outline, so they have been conformed. So that's pretty cool. The other thing I could do is if I have an offline that I might want to use as a comparison tool, something like that, I can do that pretty easily by going to my timeline, using a snap function, taking that offline, dragging and dropping it into position. So now I have a vertical stack of the elements that I want to take a look at. Now, it's really easy then to go through and see the time code alignment just in this particular tool. We could do this out on the desktop as well and just toggle through and see, yep, that looks like that matches, that looks like that matches, and if something doesn't match, I can go back up to the list, pick it, tell it where that particular content is, and do a link on that for our work. Once we're confident that the conform has been done appropriately, we can get rid of the comparison tool, and now all we have left is the content with all the individual clips that are ready for grading. And now we can take this into the grading application for final color. Here we are in the grading portion of Flame Premium. And the first thing that we need to do after we navigate to where our content is pull our content from the library that we were just using into the grading environment for work. Now, I've just navigated into my local machine here, which is called Viper, and into the project folders that we were just working with. And actually, I've got a shortcut that should open up exactly the path to where that content is located. And there it is. So here is the timeline that we're using hidden, and I'm going to do some source grading on that. That means that when I pull this content over into my library, it's going to pull the timeline elements and all of the source material into my library so that I can use all that material. It's actually just references back to the originals, as well as the timeline itself, which is outlined in red. Green sources, the actual timeline in red. Take the timeline, put it into the storyboard area, and pretty quickly we can see the timeline put together. And this represents exactly what we saw in Flame Premium as we were doing all of our work a few minutes ago. And if we look at the timeline, sure enough, there it is. We could scrub through this. These are all the clips that we were using in that environment. And the thing that we really need to consider at this point is how we want to work with this content, right? So one of the things that we talked about a little bit earlier was just the idea of having consistent looking color. And if we want to, see here in grading, we can use the color transforms and we can navigate to where our transforms are. This is the ACES workflow. So again, having consistent color management through grading, through effects, through editorial is really important. Now, in this particular job, though, what we were really concerned with was trying to replicate what the guys at Cinepost did with their own color science. So sure enough, here's that same lookup table. We'll apply that, and instantly we have that LUT being applied to our log material and showing us the same look that we saw in our timeline back in the editorial interface. So if we go ahead and we play through this, this is exactly what we saw before. Now there's a couple of things that we want to do with this. Because it's kind of a period piece, it really wanted to have kind of a raw, gritty feel, you know. So actually the LUT is doing a little bit of that right now. But within grading, we have tools in here for doing special effects. Things like blurs, things like defocus, and things like that. But one of them is a print bleach tool. Now this print bleach tool, I can go in and I can start dialing in the amount of correction that I want, or the amount of the effect that I want, to kind of retain essentially the optical photochemical process of the silver remaining on the film through the development process. So you start to get this really crunchy look. Now this is one way to achieve the look that we're trying to get. Let's go ahead and I'm going to use my grade bin over here to save that look. I can save as many of these looks that I want in here. Based on global settings or projects, there's multiple bins in here to work with. I'm also going to expand this bin up a little bit and turn off my print bleach for the moment, because inside my presets here I have a number of different tools that I could use that would allow me to apply some preset looks. So maybe it's a wash or sort of a gel that you might want to put on here, or maybe some diffusion filters if you wanted to give it kind of a foggy look, you could. And there's just different densities of this, you know, kind of fog filter that you could use. And that's not necessarily what I want. Under the film tools, there's actually, if we scroll through here, there are some bleach bypass tools that I might like to use. And this one's a neutral look. And that gives me that same sort of crunchy, dark look that I'm looking for when the silver hasn't been removed from the film during processing. So let's go back out to this the desktop area and take a look at that and go, well, that looks pretty good, but this is just essentially a starting point, and now I could go in and start making some adjustments. But let's take a look at the kind of a comparison between the two. So I've now saved the two different looks. This one using the preset, and this one using the tools within the effects palette. And you really can choose one or the other. You can modify them to your desire. This one, as a starting point, doesn't really plug up the blacks quite as much as the other preset. And so I'm going to choose to work with this particular look. Now I'll rewind my shot back to the beginning of the clip, and let's just start playing it down. And I'm going to play it in a loop mode, because what's really powerful about the grading application here is the ability to go in and just start doing adjustments on the fly, maybe to the gains, maybe do some cross-processing with my gains and gammas to get the look that I'm trying to achieve, something like that. Maybe let's bring the blacks down just a little bit more and punch the whites a little bit, maybe desat it just a little bit more. Something like that is really the look that I'm trying to achieve. And I'm doing that all based on the visual feedback that I'm getting, and I'm doing it on the fly. And this is something that's a very powerful tool within Flame Premium to be able to do this kind of work. Now, once I've made that sort of a decision, then I can go and copy that to some of my other clips. So this particular shot, second one in the storyboard area, what we can do is just copy this on the end of the pen by holding a hotkey, dragging and dropping from shot 1 to shot 2. And now it has that same sort of contrasty look. It's using the bleach bypass filter on it as well for the effect. Now if you think about what a colorist has to do for consistency's sake through a project, they have to do this a lot. And you have to do it very quickly. I mean, you think about maybe 200, 300, 400 shots that you have to do in an hour. You're really banging through the content. So it's really nice to be able to make multiple selections of these elements, go to your first shot, and again copy and paste it to all the shots in that grouping. And being able to do that really speeds the process along. And if there's other shots that you might want to use that same sort of look for, here we go, this little sequence, again, copy, paste, and now that's been applied to those shots. Now, there are a number of tools here that can make this process of getting through a vast amount of clips really, really fast. One of them is to take a look at your clips in a view that shows them oriented still from the first clip to the last clip. But we can see some common areas of interest in the particular elements. But what if we went to a tool like this, under Editing and Assemble, C mode, and did a sort of that same content, and now went back and took a look at this in our viewport that shows the association of files that came from a common location. Take a look at these files here, right here, this one through this section here. These all came from kind of a similar area. All right, so now if we go back and we hit Editing, go to Assemble again, and say Sort one more time, now we're focused on just an area of interest that is from common elements. So now when we start taking a look at maybe doing some grading or things like that, let's take some of the warmth out of that shot just by doing something like this. And then we might want to apply that to the associated shots here as well. So make that selection and do the same thing. Copy, drag, drop, and now we've got that applied to all those shots. So some really great tools for getting through the content really, really fast. And then when you're done making that selection and that adjustment, go back to A mode, unsort, and those shots have now been put back into their playout order. So we can see here, this shot, it's a little bit of a blue cast, this one, and if we scrub down toward the end, here's the sequence that we were also just kind of working with as well, with that bit of that bluish look. So let's go back to the beginning, actually the second shot that I've got here. You'll recall this one, where the guys are walking into the shot. And what we want to do with this shot is to start to drive our eye into different areas of the shot by playing with the densities of different areas. And if you take a look at this, the guys walking in are really being overpowered by some of the other areas of the shot, the street, things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our secondaries, where we have lots of control over the elements that are here. Essentially going to make just a soft edge matte at this point and go into the grading controls. Just bring our gammas down a bit. In fact, this matte that I've got in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break the control handles and kind of build a little bit of density here, almost like the shadows. We're kind of replicating the shadowing that's in there. Really starting to kind of build off that a little bit. So now we start to get some areas that are not attracting my eye nearly as much. And in fact, if we start to play this down, you'll feel like your eye is more drawn to the guys that are walking up to pull this street cover up. You know, they're walking into the shadow. So again, this is, you know, one of those tricks that you often use in color with the densities, not just the you know, the kind of hues and things like that to achieve color correction, but really start to play with relighting. Let's go to another layer on this. And in this particular layer, what I thought I'd do is I'd start to use some of the keying tools that are in here. So if we just go ahead and tap this area up in the sky, we've pulled a luminance key for that area. And I want to restrict that luminance key to just along the building outline like this. So I'm just making a quick mask that goes around that area, something like that. Because I also want to play a little bit with another shape that's going to go in here that's really going to be more of again, sort of a density assist, and really feather that out to build in some control and some light. Let's really soften that out a lot. In fact, we can pan this down just a little bit so you can see really what I'm doing. So I've really just made a mask here, and we move that along, and that mask and that other shape are actually going to work pretty well, except for the fact that my shot moves. Well, that's not really a problem, because what I've got in here is a point tracker that I could put on the cupola and go ahead and track that. And it's gathering data very, very quickly. You can see the tracker, you can see the reference clip there, and then assign that track to my shape that I've got here. Just make an adjustment. Actually, let's get a little bit of softness too. Let's go softness to the inside. So just feather that a little bit, something like that. And that now follows right along with my elements. And if we take a look at the matte, that follows perfectly. Terrific. And now what I could do with the color there is maybe pull in a little bit of blue and pull my gammas down just a little bit to really kind of build a gradient into the sky, something like that. Just for some interest. I know in the final, I think they went a little more magenta, something along those lines. But really quick way of doing this. Let me reframe my shot here so we get a little bit better look at what's going on. Bring that up a little larger. There we go. And I'll play that down. So the track is taking care of the shape along the building, or we've got this density built into the foreground to bring our eyes more to the two guys that are coming up to the manhole cover to lift that off. Really quick ways of relighting and almost painting with light. This particular shot is pretty interesting. Okay, so first of all, it seems a little warm. That's not a big problem. What we'll do is we'll just put a little primary blue back into it, something like this, kind of using the gammas to pull that to make it feel more winterish, you know, and you get a little bit of more magenta in his face. So that looks pretty nice. Now, the second part of this is that as he turns toward camera, I would like to draw a little more attention to his eyes, partially because the density of the bleach bypass is kind of giving me a little too much density in there that I really don't need. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a shape on his face. Let's just put this about right here. And I'm going to do just a quick shape track on this. Now when I do that, what we end up seeing is that shape following his nose right along. And I'll go backwards just a little bit, something like this. We'll get a little more of his head turn. There's a little bit more. That's good. So now that shape track is following his face around. That's going to work out pretty well, because what we're going to do is we're going to hide that, and I'm going to make a couple more shapes. We'll do one here, a little softness, make another one here, like that, give it a little softness, something like that. And then this is something that will be pretty familiar to you if you're a flame guy or a smoke guy. It's the node structure to be able to tie those different shapes and the tracking geometry together so that now that area tracks right together. And really essentially what you're seeing here is something that looks like this, which is pretty cool. So now the idea here is that once we have that, what I can do is turn on an auto keyframe tool. And as he turns his head toward camera, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring the gammas up just a little bit. Okay, so if we start there, which is the normal position, and then scrub just a little bit forward and bring that up just a touch. In fact, what we'll also do is on my shape, I'm going to also give it a bit more blur as well. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm just feathering that out even further. So now what I've done is I've built just a little animation, you can see it right here, of the gamma coming up. And it's really subtle, but it pulls his eyes, that kind of darker tones that were kind of set back in there that limited what I was seeing. The other thing that I think is kind of interesting about this shot too is that we can also go and use an effect on this. The effect that I might want to use in this is going to be, let's go and use a blur mix. That'll be great. So essentially, this is a way to just kind of blur the whole shot. And this is what's really cool about this, is I'm still playing real time as I go through this. So I don't really want to blur the whole shot. What I want to do is I want to use the blur and the mask, and that's probably too much blur, but if I give it a negative mix, that becomes our sharpen tool. Now we're going to draw even more focus to his eyes, because they're going to sharpen up much more than they were. And if we zoom in on this and just kind of toggle that on and off, and it's going to be a little tough to see probably in your feed that you've got on your webinar, just turn that on and off. And we're just really bringing in just a little more detail into his eyes like that, so that when he turns to camera, let's go back to our regular color tools like this, and then hit play. Our eyes are drawn to his eyes. They become the focus of the shot, and that's a lot what DI is about. Changing where your eye is going by directing it using the tools that a colorist has in their palette. So, really pretty cool way to use the tools here inside the grading application. Now, the final one that I wanted to take a look at really quick with you is going to be based on the color grade that Sebastian did. So I'm going to load up his grade and scrub down to in here. And the reason I wanted to look at this particular shot, let's go back to the beginning of it, is Sebastian did a really great job of bringing all the things together that I've shown you so far to create a completely new mood in this shot. So first of all, what did it look like to begin with? Let's put it in bypass mode, and you can see what's going on here. So this is with all the light in the shot. It actually has the LUT still built into it. But look how much light had to be in the shot originally because it's being shot with red. You can also see a shift in the light. So there's a lot of things that we have to do this shot to really correct it. All right. So let's take a look at what Sebastian did on this shot. Just a little bit of a show and tell, because this one's really interesting. There's 9 layers of control going on here. And in fact, if I scrub through this, take a look at the primaries. He's animating the primaries all through this shot to compensate for what's going on with the lighting that had to be added to keep the noise level down on the Mysterium chip on the red camera. So if you take a look at the gains and the gammas as they're moving up and down. The other thing I think it's really interesting is as you start looking at some of the things that he did in these different layers for doing animation. Let's take a look at layer 2. So we're pulling just a really soft edge key on this in order to work on some of the areas in here. Let's just toggle this on and off. So we're lifting some of the background up to reveal these people that are living in the sewer. Go to this layer. We start looking at the animation in here. You'll see that right back in here in this corner, really subtle, there's a face. So we're working the lighting in that area to bring that face on and off as we toggle through the different tools. And it's probably a little tracking shape. All right, so that's really an interesting look. The other one is that as the guys are walking in, we've also got an effect added. So the print bleach look is there, and that's consistent throughout every shot. But he's also added a glow plugin, which brings in this kind of starriness and a bit of glow on there to really enhance the flashlights that are in the shot. Sebastian did such a nice job with this this piece and with this particular shot. I really wanted to share it with you because it had so much detail and subtlety worked into the shot to make it it really sing. You know, so if we go ahead and we scrub through this or play through this, you can see all the different elements, you know, that are coming together in this shot to make it really a well-crafted and balanced element. Now, something that happens often is that at the end of a project or the end of the process, you may have versions that start to arrive. And that's exactly what's happened in this particular instance. Let's go back to our browser and open up some timelines that have been worked on in tandem. While we've been doing our color correction session, there's some other things been going on editorially for some versions. And in fact, there's a shorter version of this these elements that's been put together that we need to address. And we see it here. Let's go ahead and clear out our existing storyboard area and take this short version and drag it down into the storyboard area. And just like we saw the long version before, it's then put together. And if we take a look at the elements, there's no LUT applied. These are the shots that are of interest for the short version. So there's a couple of things that we need to address here. Okay, so first of all, the original color correction. We did a lot of work on it already. So what we're going to do is we're going to load up the long version. Okay, so here it is with all its color corrections. We scrub through that. We see all the masks and everything within that. Now what we'll do is we'll go back to the short version and do what's called a change cut. That then swaps out the media in favor of the new media, but retains all of the different effects and things that are going on. So now we can see there's quite a few less shots in this timeline. And as we scrub through here, you can see the masks are all lining up with the different people's faces, or in some cases, here's the eyes, and things like that. So this is a really great way of being able to take all that color grading metadata and move it from one set of shots into another completely different set of shots that configure this shorter timeline. The other thing that I'll call your attention to is this particular shot, because in the original version there were no clouds in the sky. It was really flat, and we wanted an option that had those in there. All right, now we swapped out enough media in this particular shot that it didn't do our change cut for that element. But we've also got in our grade bin for the scene, we have all of the metadata stored there that we can recall just by double tapping on this particular clip. So double tap, and everything comes back. If we take a look at the secondary layers, there's our shading for the foreground. There's our grade that we did for the sky. If we take a look at this particular element, there's the building, and there's something for the tower. Now, here's the thing though, there's a little purple icon on this, okay? And that little purple icon in there, if we take a look at our timeline, also is associated with our timeline here. It's purple as well. And that is a visual cue to me that that is a container. If we open that up, inside the container, there's actually two clips. And those clips are the foreground element with the comp of the sky and a matte element. Now this matte looks kind of funny, and we sometimes call it a disco matte because it has multiple colors in it. And why is this valuable? And well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that the masking and everything that was done for the comp already took place once. Why do I need to recreate this? Okay, so I'm repurposing the mattes from the environment in compositing in Flame Premium for here in grading. The other part of the benefit is there's actually 3 mattes contained in one video file, and that reduces the amount of stress that is applied to the disk array when you're trying to make a real-time playback of your material. So when we hit play on this, everything plays in real time. We switch this back so we see our foreground elements and our comp. That all plays no problem. So let's go back and see how we can use this to our advantage. All right. So we've already applied all of the color correction elements to this that we needed, with the exception of layer 2. Now layer 2, we had done a luminance key on this earlier to do some of the work in the sky. And if we look at that element now, it doesn't make much sense because the actual pieces here, let's go ahead and delete this portion of the geometry. The actual piece that we have in here is a little bit more along the lines of a full matte that was generated within Flame Premium that looks something like this. Let's just make this a lot bigger so you can see what's going on. So it's a full matte that we've got there. Let's invert that matte. Now we've got something that makes maybe a little more sense. Let's shrink our ellipse down and use that now as that soft edge to bring in that magenta area. All right, so now if we go back to our composite and we take a look at this, let's pan this over, this matte now is bringing in some of that magenta into the clouds for that evening look in this particular shot. And we can also add our own sets of masks here now for some other elements that are happening. Let's go back to the matte, take a look. There's a matte for the car in the distance. Let's go to this one. Let's pick the matte for the truck on the left side of the screen. So now if we go back in here and we go back to secondary 5, go to our grading, move our gammas up just a little bit, actually a lot, so just so you can see it. So right there, we're able to pull the gammas up just a little bit to make that pop just a little bit more. Let's zoom in on my raster just a little bit so you can see what's going on. And then scrub through that. So that's now a little more in play. Let's pull that back just a little bit. Same thing with the truck on the left side. Actually, I think its density is fine. I just like to give it a little bit of a warmer tone. So let's do that. Something along those lines. All right. So now I could just say turn those off and on just to mute those so you can see the color applied. You can see that the matte that was created was tracked in place for us. So that all works. And our full color correction portion of the scene, everything that was done before is still intact on the scene and works really, really well. So it's a really cool way of using the matte elements from compositing and bringing it back into grading and still retain all of the decisions that you had done before and apply them very, very quickly. Then you saw how fast it was to move into the new matte from the mask that we had before. All right, so with all that done and all the shots color corrected, we can see a number of different animations going on as I scrub through here of all the things Sebastian did on a number of the other shots. We're going to go ahead and render this content. So we go back to our rendering tools, and we can render this with all the source clips, with the heads and tails, as a multi-layer timeline if necessary. We've got tools in here to add the LUT. We're going to bake the LUT into the result images as this goes back into our environment for editorial and doing any VFX work. There's resize tools in here. We're not going to do anything like that. We're going to keep it at its original resolution. And there's tools that we can send this off for background processing if you've got a back burner rendering farm, something like that. So with that done, what we do is we just go ahead, rewind the shot, and we press start, and it's off to the races for our render. Welcome back to the Flame Premium desktop, and you can see here that we've got the timeline ungraded that we were using as our starting point for the conform in our timeline. If we scrub through this, you'll see all the different shots that we've been working with, but as I mentioned, in their ungraded form. If we also take a look at this timeline, you'll notice that there's an extra layer on here. And that's because while we were doing our grading simultaneously, whether it was on this machine or another machine, could have been on a smoke, there was another layer added to the timeline, using it as a reference and a layout that has our lower third subtitles. And if we move from clip to clip, we can see all these different elements laid out here. And it's really pretty easy to do subtitles on this timeline using this as a guide. Let's go ahead and just recenter this and just give you a quick example of how easy it is to do this. Let's just take this particular clip right here, and with a snap function turned on, go ahead and copy that onto the end of my pen, drag it down, let's say maybe to the first clip that we've got here, and now clearly this that has the wrong type on it, but that's okay. And then we can just stretch this out. Notice how quickly it is and easy it is to manipulate this. If we then open up the Soft Effects tab, we can see that my text tool is sitting here as a soft effect on my timeline. I can enter the editor for that, go into an editing mode. Let's go ahead and put our new subtitle in for this. Let's say, how about quiet? We must not be seen. So select that, center it, lower third, exit the tool set, and now that's been put on my timeline. So really easy ways to manipulate the text and the type to build up our subtitles. Okay, once we've got that done, now it would be really cool if we could put our new material in here, our new graded material in here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to collapse this down, and I'm going to make a quick copy of this. So we'll keep our original up here, but we'll start working with this copy. And this copy that I've got sitting here is actually sitting in one of my reels. Let's call it graded subtitles. Okay, now with that done, what we'll do is we're going to take our whole lower layer here and copy it up onto itself. So now we get a duplicate layer. Take that duplicate layer, go to my tool set here and say Media Unlink. That's great. So now what I've done is I've unlinked the middle layer of my timeline. And now if I go to my Conform tool, what I can see here is a number of linked clips in the Conform tool that's referring to the timeline that we're working on right now, and a number of clips that have this red triangle X by them. Well, problem is that I need to find where that content is located that I can relink the graded material. And it's really not that big a problem, because if you remember, our render from the grading application went into a folder over here called Luster, and there's a nomenclature here that says there's 63 clips in there. And if we open this up, there's all the graded material. And then what I can do is I can right click on this and set this as the location for my link. I've got check marks now next to all those clips, so I've got a positive match. There's actually a couple there that don't seem to be quite right, so we can go and say source timecode, make sure that's right. Now if we scrub through this, it looks like we've got positive matches on all that content, and we can say link. Now if we take a look at our timeline and we scrub through it, you can see there's no red outlines on any of our content. Let's go back to the large viewer, scrub through this, and what's really cool about this is that If we take a look at the stacking mechanism here, we can go down to the base plate and we can see the ungraded material. We can move up one layer. There's the graded material, and we move up one layer more. Now we can see our subtitles. This is a terrific way of managing a timeline with graded and ungraded material for versioning, for just being able to say, what did it look like at the beginning of this particular piece? Well, we just go down to the base plate. That's what it looked like. That is the ungraded flat material. So this is a great example of using Flame Premium for a DI workflow where you're using the tools that are best suited for doing conform and timeline manipulation within Flame Premium. Working with lookup tables, we talked a little about the ACES pipeline and how you can manage color through the Autodesk Color Management tools. We're using the more of a standard color management workflow at this point, using the 3D lookup tables that the guys and Sebastian Guz at Cinepost Productions in Berlin, Germany gave us. Then we took that timeline, we move it into grading, we do our look development in there. We work in a very quick environment because we've got lots of shots to get done with a DI in the course of a day. Get that content, render it back into my Flame Premium project, relink it using the new tools that we found in Conform, and also incorporate subtitling elements into the timeline for a great round-trip workflow. I'd like to sum up today's webinar by thanking you for joining us today for a look at Autodesk Flame Premium 2013 Anniversary Edition as a full-service set of tools for digital intermediate projects. I hope the last 50 minutes has been useful for you if you're an existing Autodesk Flame Premium customer. If you're not an existing customer, I hope that the workflows and tools you have seen today give you good insight to the beginnings of what is possible in grading, editing, and visual effects using Autodesk Flame Premium 2013's Anniversary Edition. This is Paul Andrews in Chicago saying thank you